Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in a few minutes, so if everyone can start taking their seats, please. All right, everyone, good morning. We're going to get started. So I'm going to ask you all to rise briefly for the national anthem, please. Thank you.
If you don't mind, can you please take us a video? You can stand there. They sorted.
Thank you so much to our choir for that wonderful rendition. I hope that's gotten everyone in the mood this morning. Welcome to South Africa and welcome to the World Conference of Science Journalists. I'm Sarusha Govender. I'm a science journalist and broadcaster, policy researcher, and very proud member of the local organizing committee. So as I said, welcome to Africa. We're so excited to have you all here. We're looking out at you this morning and I see journalists that I only know from Twitter or from bylines, and science editors that we connect with over email and Skype, but this is the first time for a while we're having you in Africa and we get to see you all face to face. So I have to tell you, this really feels remarkable for us. And we've been planning this for so long, so to finally see this room so full, and to know we'll be spending the next few days learning from each other and challenging each other and sharing our work, it's genuinely exciting for us. And congratulations, I hear, on navigating the convoluted and adventurous travel arrangements. If your journey took some interesting turns along the way, just know you're in very good company, and we are thrilled that you all made it here eventually. And for many of us in this room, just gathering on this continent represents years of advocacy on behalf of science journalism, and particularly African science journalism. So thank you for coming and for believing that this matters. And over the next few days, you're going to hear extraordinary stories, meet brilliant scientists and journalists, and hopefully build connections that will last long beyond this week. And that's what we're really here for, to strengthen our global science community. And a global science community that is committed to evidence accuracy and to telling stories that matter and that shape the world. And this conference really exists because of people like you, because you believe it matters, and because our organizers worked so tirelessly to bring it here, and because you all showed up today. So thank you for that. So today we're going to run through a couple of keynote addresses. We're going to do some introductory briefings, and we're also going to have our wonderful Honorable Minister Blade Nzimande join us later for some remarks. So first, we're going to have a safety briefing, so you all can stay safe throughout your wonderful week here. Before we do the safety briefing, the Minister will be joining us on stage. So if you could all just rise briefly to welcome the Minister. The Honourable Professor Blade Nzimande. Welcome, Minister. Thank you for joining us. And now we'll be having our safety briefing, so you could all stay safe throughout the week.
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the ICC. My name is Jobe Mkachwa. I'm the Safety and Setup Coordinator. All protocol is observed. In case of an emergency, please do not panic, do not run. An alarm will sound. Please use the nearest exit. Take what you can. Do not use the lift. Look up for slips and trips. In case you're not feeling well, we have medics on site to assist you. Please let our friendly staff know. They'll direct you to the venue where the medics are. Please use hand sanitizers. They are located around the venue. The ablation facilities, we have signage. The nearest one is if you exit this door, this side. Please take care of your personal belongings as this is a public building. Enjoy the rest of your session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we'll all stay very safe this week. Thank you for keeping us safe. We're going to move on to opening remarks from our local association host, Mandy Smallhorn. If I can invite you up onto stage. Thank you.
Can you all see me over the bunkie? Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Honourable Minister Blade Nzimande, and Dr. Tulani Dlamini of the CSIR, I'm not sure where he is, and Advocate Cormac Cullen. And to all the science journalists who've come to join us here in Pretoria, thank you and welcome to one and all. It's so exciting to see you here. And by the way, I just want to say to all the people that I'm seeing walking past me who actually know me, my eyes aren't working that well, so if I don't see you, please just stop me and say, hi, Mandy, okay? I just want to talk a little bit about science journalism and why this conference matters. Most of us who found ourselves engaged in this field, purposefully or accidentally, stay with it because we love it. We are fascinated and awed by the questions science asks and answers, by the worlds that it opens to us. We're intrigued by the personalities and the topics and the little wars and the amazing collaborations that are part and parcel of science. We are absorbed by the process of science, by the scientific method, and we know that however the arguments play out about science all around the world, that method, that way of questioning the world, is a basic and fundamental part of our human nature, and we believe that scientific research plays a vital role in our lives. We also know that science and scientific researchers have their flaws, and we are, as part of the Fourth Estate, one of the mechanisms that ensures that science researchers and institutions are questioned and held accountable. Whether through training or experience, we learn the questions that need to be asked and the info that's being skated over, and we dig into uncomfortable things that need to be unearthed. And this is key to the critical job that science journalists do, the role that we play. Holding science to account is not the job of our valued partners in the business of telling science stories, science communicators and communicating scientists, of which, as you know, there are many blogs and so on, all around the world doing fantastic jobs. Their job is to show the world what science can do. Ours is to show that as well, but also to interrogate. Which is why we so often need to point out that we are not just a bunch of praise singers and groupies who will accept any announcement of findings uncritically. It's because we care about science and value its role that we dig deep to uncover scientific misconduct or fraud and work to fight false messaging and poor communication. During the last decade or two, we've seen the arrival of technological innovations which have radically altered the way science is done and how science journalists can tackle it. It has also, as you well know, radically altered the ability of everybody in the world to create false messaging and poor messaging. New technology is making it possible to bring science and scientific findings to life on different platforms, using techniques ranging from animation to scrollytelling, to acute and targeted use of data, both with and without AI. I think people forget that there's still data being done in other ways. There are so many examples of magical science storytelling by science journalists and science communicators. So many extraordinary feats of translating science into a sort of useful enchantment that makes you feel excitement as you read, seeing the wonder of this world. Part of the wonder that keeps one coming back to this field again and again. And it's part of the weight that science carries, the weight of the world, you might say. And that brings us to the theme of this conference, science journalism and social justice. Journalism that builds understanding and resilience. Public awareness and understanding of scientific concepts and research are essential to a resilient and equitable community. That's the position we came from in shaping our bid and shaping this conference. We live in a world which is based on and infused by the findings of scientific research. For instance, each of you carries in your pocket a miracle of communication, computing, access to data and information that would not have been possible without science. And yet we seldom think of it that way. I always laugh when I see people promoting anti-science views on phones. I mean, you know. Without some basic knowledge of the sciences and of science news, we can't understand and make decisions about our world. Decisions about how to ensure our children are healthy, about how we use power and water, about the products we choose to buy, about who to vote for. And while many in the global north have access to that info, although they may not use it effectively, many in the global south do not. Science journalists who can use their storytelling skills to explain technology, research, and applied science are essential to the growth of social justice. Science journalists take arcane and opaque information and turn it into something useful for communities. We wanted to highlight that important role in this conference, and we hope that delegates will leave filled not only with new knowledge and heightened skills, but also with a sense of themselves as vital actors in the job of making the world better, safer, healthier, and most of all, more just and equal. I want to thank the board of the World Federation of Science Journalists, and there's Debbie over there, for their support in this endeavor. I want to thank those essential stakeholders, our sponsors and grantors, for their assistance and for their faith in this conference. I want to thank our partner, the Science Diplomacy Capital for Africa, for their incredible and valuable assistance. We have been so grateful for the support of our Minister and Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. And I personally want to thank the small group, men and women of steel, who make up our local organizing committee. The last week or so, they've had to display that steel. And I, personally, must especially thank Bronwyn Cardelponte and Engela Duvenaga. No one will ever be able to tot up how much work Bronwyn did during the early stages of the bid and the subsequent conference organizing. And when I became ill, Engela took on the role of conference director at great personal sacrifice, and I have to say with great aplomb, showing a natural talent for management and leadership. I am so grateful to them both. And I want to say thank you to the country that made us and that inspired this conference. I am a very proud South African, as you can tell right now. I cry still when I hear Nkosi Sikelelo being sung. And lastly, I am grateful to you, science journalists and science communicators, for whom this conference was created. You are what it's all about, what it's all been about. I am sure the next few days will be exciting and inspiring. Go forth and enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mandy, for those beautiful, heartfelt words. We are being hosted today by the wonderful CSIR, and they do a lot of incredible science here, and we have prepared a short video for you to just show you what's been happening here at the center where you'll all be spending the week.
At the start of our 80-year celebration, above all, we celebrate CSIR people. Individuals whose passion, dedication, and drive have enabled us to stand out and stand firm on a solid foundation of scientific skill and technological achievement, one of the cornerstones of our CSIR values. People who care about touching the lives of those with whom they share this country and continent. We also celebrate the many achievements along our 80-year timeline, achievements that have emerged due to our relentless determination to deliver excellence. significant milestones from way back that revolutionized entire industries such as the teleurometer and what it did for land surveying worldwide. And in more recent years, a life-saving ventilator when, during the COVID-19 pandemic, South Africa was left vulnerable as a result of its dependence on imported medical products. South African firsts, such as the first text-to-speech product that could deliver synthetic voices in 11 of South Africa's official languages. Solutions that surpassed the expectations of our stakeholders. Excellence that resulted in world-class products like a laser system for sorting diamonds, probiotics with a longer shelf life, a new vegan protein powder, a robotic arm that repairs blades inside massive power generation turbines, and many more. The CSIR's value lies in improving the competitiveness of industry and the quality of life for people. This has remained our true north for over 8 decades. Perhaps for once, the story of our impact is best told by others.
Re leboga ba CSIR gore ba tlile ba tlo re bontsha gore ga se ka puku fela le technology ya kgona go ruta ngwana go bala le go ngwala le go kwešiša.
We are pretty much joined at the hip to the level of testing that we require from the CSIR.
We jumped at the opportunity to partner with them, ultimately with the intent of understanding wind better, utilizing and taking advantage of the skill set and the expertise at CSIR, and then working towards very practical outcomes that we as a port will benefit from, but the industry as a whole.
And with the collaboration with them, we're able to produce something much more valuable and much more unique, catered to the user's needs.
We then certainly thought that this will be a great partnership because, of course, the basic scientists need tumor to actually work from. And of course, we have no laboratory facilities or laboratory experience at all.
The formulation was actually researched and produced by the CSIR.
We see this as an ideal example of a public-private partnership and how you support small business in South Africa. So highly competent scientific team and a facility here. Greg and I bring the commercial side. We've of course had to learn a lot of the science along the way, which is important for us. And what we find is we have a healthy dynamic and we see the CSIR as a long-term partner within our business.
A farm like Abergold has got a standing stock of about 650 tons of abalone in farm. That's 5,000 tanks, about 40,000 baskets, probably about 15 million animals. In 2017, I believe, we had a algal bloom that we were, let's say, unprepared for. We had mortalities of about 40% in that year. Since then, we've learned to manage it much better. We've learned to anticipate it with systems like the OSIMs, and if we weren't prepared, it would take us years to rebuild that biological asset losses that we incur. And one of those tools that keeps us sustainable is a CSR tool that manages our algal blooms for us.
Lots of these fires start in hard-to-reach places, and I think drones is part of the solution, so we can reach these places. But using sensors and technology like the CSIR has developed really completes the solution. There's nothing that competes with it right now. There's no other way to get somewhere that's hard to reach very quickly and to apply technology that is, such world-class to save lives, limit destruction. It's a fantastic initiative. I'm hoping it's the first of many that we can do with the CSIR.
Perhaps the most exciting part of turning 80 is celebrating how well we are placed today to put our collective brilliance to work for the country's future well-being. Dedicated to realizing our vision of accelerating socio-economic prosperity for our country. 80 years of touching lives through innovation.
Thank you, and believe it or not, all of that incredible science is happening in this small complex where we are this week. So I hope you get to read a bit more about that and visit our exhibition center and see a bit more about that. I'd like to invite up now our host and CEO of the CSIR, Dr. Thulani Dlamini.
Now I feel very tall. Thank you very much, Program Director, Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Professor Nzimande, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, President of the World Federation of Science Journalists and Serbian Science TV anchor, Milika Momsilovic, President of the South African Science Journalists Association, Mandy Smallhorn, Director of the 13th World Conference of Science Journalists, Angela Duvenage, representatives from science councils, academia, and industry, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the CSIR, I extend our warmest welcome to all of you to the CSIR on this very special occasion. The CSIR is honored to host you today at our International Convention Centre, a hospitable venue that I'm confident you will enjoy. I would also like to congratulate the South African Science Journalists Association and the Science Diplomacy Capital for Africa for organizing this event. The Science Diplomacy Capital for Africa is an initiative of the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, which is hosted here at the CSIR. This initiative promotes collaboration with the aim of leveraging and connecting technological innovation with humanity. The 13th World Conference of Science Journalists, hosted under the theme Science, Journalism and Social Justice, journalism that builds understanding and resilience, comes at an opportune time in the history of the CSIR. Not only is this conference taking place on the African soil for the first time, but it also coincides with the year in which the CSIR is commemorating 80 years of existence. Founded in 1945 on the conviction that organized research can be a catalyst for technological advancement and industrialization, the CSIR has remained a driving force for innovation and progress in South Africa and in other parts of the world. Our work has laid the foundation for the creation of several industries. We have pioneered the development of a number of world-class technologies that have positioned South Africa and Africa as a world leader in these areas, giving us, of course, a very strong global competitive advantage. We have licensed several technologies in South Africa and abroad, demonstrating the depth of our technological capabilities, and we have provided a number of technological solutions that have contributed to the development of a capable state. Reporting on science, engineering, and technology is critical in our modern society, serving as a conduit that bridges the intricate work of the scientific community with the curiosity and understanding of the general public. Given the many issues our world is facing today, from climate change to public health, energy security, and emerging technologies, it is through clear, accurate, and responsible reporting that societies can understand these issues, respond wisely, and develop trust in public institutions. This conference is very important because of its potential to highlight the important role journalism plays in the scientific community. The field of journalism ensures that scientific discoveries are communicated truthfully, responsibly, and in ways that empower and educate the public. As humans, we innately connect through stories. Since time immemorial, stories have been our way of transmitting knowledge across generations, teaching values, and inspiring each other. Humans have told stories in many ways, through cave drawings, wisdom passed down from our forefathers, or symbols woven in song and dance. These have carried meaning across generations, shaping our understanding of the world today. Science journalism carries the stories of discovery, innovation, and progress, ensuring that knowledge is not only preserved, but made accessible to all. Science journalists serve as a bridge between society and the scientific community. They hold the scientific community accountable to the public. Just as business journalists hold industry to account, science journalists ensure that scientists remain accountable to society. Scientists and engineers hold powerful tools that can shape society, but with that power comes also a significant amount of responsibility. As scientists, we are called to use our knowledge to build a world where there is prosperity and a reduction of human suffering. Science journalism reminds us of this responsibility. By asking probing questions, by examining the implications of discovery, and by making sure the public understands the promises and risks of science. Science is not only technical, it has social and cultural impacts, and we must recognize them. Science journalism shines a light on these dimensions, addressing issues of fairness, equity, and justice. By telling these stories, journalists help societies understand how science affects communities and ensure that no one is left behind. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this conference will strengthen the role of science journalism and help build a future where truth guides our decisions and science serves humanity with integrity. Thank you and welcome to the 13th World Conference on Science Journalism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dlamini, for those inspiring words. And as Dr. Dlamini mentioned, he thanked many of our partners who have supported us and helped us get here today. And I do want to make a special mention of the World Federation of Science Journalists as well, and its president, Ben Daytons. They came from around the world. They're all here today in the audience. And thank you so much for all of your support. We really appreciate it. And I'd like to invite up on stage now to give some remarks Dr. Dan du Toit, or Mr. Dan du Toit, the DDG, I've promoted him, the DDG of the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation.
Thank you very much, Program Director, for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, my job is very simple, and that is to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning's session, and that is the Minister. I have the huge privilege to serve, Professor Nzimande, South Africa's Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation. But not only is Minister Nzimande a committed champion for science, technology and innovation in South Africa, and the role science, technology and innovation should play to create a better life for all South Africans, he's also a champion for the African agenda. For those of you who had a science forum last week will know that the minister passionately is championing a truly African-owned and African-funded research agenda. But the minister is also an important champion for international cooperation in science. And I do hope you would have perused the Leaders Summit declaration of the recently successful G20 summit which South Africa hosted, because in that declaration are very important commitments to internationalism and solidarity in science, technology and innovation. And that really is the result of the Minister's leadership of the G20 Research and Innovation Working Group. But above that all, the Minister, over the past year, at the invitation of the World Federation of Science Journalists and the South African Science Journalists Association, has served as the patron of this event. I know it is a theme and it is a topic, science engagement, engagement with the public, which is very close to the Minister's heart, and therefore, Minister, we are really privileged that Minister is with us this morning to address this gathering, and it's my privilege to invite you. Thank you, Minister.
This is much better. Much, much better, Dr. Dlamini. There is some improvement. It's called innovation. To cater for those of us who are not short, that's disrespectful, who are not so tall. Program Director, our acting DG today, Mr. Dan Tuto is our acting DG for these few days. My special advisor, Mr. Nzimande, all our deputy directors generals who are here, and other senior officials of our department. Our host, the CEO of the CSIR, Dr. Dlamini. The board of the World Federation of Science Journalists under the president, Mr. Ben Dayton. Vice President of the World Federation of Science Journalists and President of the African Federation of Science Journalists, Mr. Joseph Mbeng. Ms. Angela Duvenache and other members of the local organizing committee. Mandy Smallhorn, President of the South African Science Journalism Association, and the rest of the leadership of this association, representatives of science and academic institutions, members of the diplomatic corps, science journalists, my special guest journalists from South Africa that I've specifically invited. Where are you? Where are the hands? Oh, we are all here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Exhibitors, students, distinguished guests, members of the local and international media. I'm really very honored to be delivering this opening address to this historic World Conference on Science Journalists 2025. I wish to take this opportunity to extend a special South African welcome to our guests from various parts of the continent and the world, and say namugelekile, which means you are most welcome. And you're always welcome. Whenever you want to come back in future, you are more than welcome. As a country, we regard it as a profound honor to host this prestigious event. For us, the 2025 World Conference of Science Journalists is special in a number of respects. First, as you may be aware, it is the first time that it is being held on the African continent. And the African continent needs science journalists in numbers, even in greater numbers than what we have now. Second, this conference just a week after our country has concluded a highly successful G20 presidency, which, like this conference, was hosted on the African continent for the first time. Third, this conference takes place on the occasion of the 4th anniversary of the SADC Science Journalist Training Course. The first course took place during the World Science Forum in 2022 in Cape Town in partnership with UNESCO, the South African Science Journalism Association, the SADC Secretariat, and Stellenbosch University. All these partners have continued to support this training course over the last 4 years, and I'm pleased to indicate this year's training course includes journalists from over 12 SADC countries. It is worth noting that all these three important international fora, the 2022 World Science Forum, South Africa's G20 presidency, and now the 2025 World Conference on Science Journalism, were all first for the African continent. Now, what are some of the key features of this conference that we particularly welcome also? The first issue I wish to reflect on is some of the key features of this conference, 2025. This year, the conference offers delegates a comprehensive program that includes 3 plenary sessions with 3 keynote speakers, 58 parallel sessions in the form of seminars, workshops, and lectures with 196 speakers. All this provides delegates with an opportunity to interact, but also to benefit from peer exchanges and the insights of various guest speakers. The hosting of this conference does not just affirm our status as a preferred destination for global conferences, it also provides us with a unique opportunity to showcase South Africa and Africa's science and cultural landscape. We've just seen a bit of it in terms of what is happening in this precinct here earlier through that video. This is why this conference also, I'm very happy, includes 21 field trips to date. I am informed that some of these trips took place yesterday and some will be happening over the next few days, including a visit to the site of the Square Kilometre Array, one of our country's premier science projects. The second issue I wish to reflect is the importance of the theme that we have chosen for this year's World Conference of Science Journalists, which is Science Journalism and Social Justice. Journalism that builds understanding and resilience. It's a very important theme. We need these things big time in the world today. We are in a very complex geopolitical situation. We are, precisely because of that, we need science diplomacy. And science diplomacy can't be practiced without science journalists and science media. It's very important. Your chosen theme is particularly apt and there's a number of implications for science journalism, scientific knowledge, science policy, and the well-being of society. First, your theme calls for us to consistently examine the value of science by constantly asking how science helps us to address global challenges such as inequality, armed conflicts, pandemics, and other health challenges, climate change, and related environmental calamities. Second, your theme enjoins us to constantly assess how science is communicated and how such communication influences social attitudes towards science. By the way, our science work is as good as it is understood out there in society. Is as good as much as it is critical science journalism, but also it's able to inform and shape attitudes towards science. Third, and perhaps more fundamentally, the call for social justice in your theme also requires us to remain vigilant and ensure that scientific knowledge or its products are always used for the advancement of humanity. We can't take that for granted. The use of science is never neutral. Science has often also been used for distraction. The call to be vigilant, therefore, is particularly urgent today when we are witnessing the use of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, not only for the targeted killing of civilians in places such as Gaza, but also how the same technology is being used in the targeted killing of journalists, by the way. Journalists have been wiped out in a number of areas in the Middle East, especially Gaza. The International Federation of Journalists reports that since the 7th October 2023, over 248 journalists and media workers were killed, and that they have evidence that the Israeli army, I quote them, has deliberately targeted journalists, and some of these cases are currently the subject of a complaint filed before the International Criminal Court, I unquote. Flowing from this, the question does arise, what is the role of science journalism in a context where countries continue to sell weapons to other countries that are committing genocide and other human rights violations? In some parts of the world, by the way, journalism has become such a dangerous profession or practice to pursue. That's why it's important to be organized, like this organization that you have, so that you are actually able to defend your profession and maintain its dignity. Journalists are not to be killed. That is something and a message. They are not to be tortured. They are not to be brutalized. They are not to be arrested at whim. They are there to provide a very important bridge in society and amongst different components of society, including between government and the people. Now, the third issue then I wish to reflect on is our efforts to promote science journalism as a country. When you informed me that we are going to be holding this year in South Africa, I was really and truly excited. Because from the perspective of our department, science journalism is an integral part of our science engagement program. You can do good science, but if it's not known, it's as good as dead science. If communities don't understand what we are doing. Through this program of ours of science engagement, we intend to build a society that is knowledgeable about science, is science literate, and is able to form independent opinions on science issues. In this connection, we view science journalism as a knowledge intermediary that includes translative science communication, in which complex scientific knowledge is adapted into simple language to be understood by all. I always challenge our scientists, unless you can explain it simply, we are not yet a full scientist. This is necessary in bridging the gap between scientific research and its application, as well as building the pathway to the potential societal impact of research. We can confidently say that South Africa has a well-developed science journalism based on the findings of an inaugural 2022 survey that we did through one of our entities, the Human Sciences Research Council, on South African public relationship with science survey. It's a very important survey because it tells us about South Africa's perception of science. This is a 5-yearly evaluation of how close as a nation we are getting to achieving the society that, as mentioned earlier, should be knowledgeable about science, be science literate, and be able to form independent opinions on science issues. As a continent of Africa, we face a huge task and challenge of developing science, technology, and innovation in our continent. Our true partners must be science journalists who must be able to report about what is happening and also problematize. We are saying you must not just be our praise singers. You know, as the president of the association here in South Africa said, you must be critical, engage as critical as governments, as ministers, and all that. But that's part of being true to your own profession. This survey, by the way, I'm talking about, revealed that television, about 60%, followed by the internet, 52%, and then radio, 51%, were the most widely used sources of knowledge on science and technology. Now, this is very important because it actually places you at the center of science promotion as journalists, as science journalists. There's also something that science journalists in our country are doing right in their coverage of science. Additionally, our aim is to establish science communication that enhances our science engagement program. By the way, to the South African Association of Science Journalists, I would really like us to have periodic engagements. I really would like that. It's good to talk to all of the journalists who may not even be science journalists, general and so on. But science journalists in particular, I would like to develop some kind of a relationship, critical interaction, so that we are able to engage each other. Share with you also some of the challenges that we have and see how you can be of help in communicating things that are very important. It is for this reason that we have linked up with both mainstream and alternative media to provide young unemployed journalism graduates with science journalism employment experience. We have managed to place slightly more than 40 journalism graduates per annum for the past 2 years, and our department provides their monthly stipends. Again, we are not bribing them to be our praise singers. We are only interested in developing them into becoming quality science journalists. Participating mainstream media channels here in South Africa include our national broadcaster, the South African Broadcasting Corporation, News 24 and Power FM, while roughly 25 community media stations are participating. We have got very vibrant community media in South Africa, and it's a very important source because it is often the closest to communities. Our work in advancing science engagement found greater expression through the declaration of the recently held G20 Leaders Summit, which endorsed the work of the G20 Research and Innovation Working Group, which I was chairing as part of the work streams of the G20. Part of the declaration stated that, I quote, "We undertake to implement the G20 recommendations on science engagement, which aim to broaden participation in and make science accessible to all in society, bolstering our commitments to open science," unquote. That's part of the G20 declaration. All this is given greater impetus by our own department's recently adopted mantra, which is placing science, technology, and innovation at the center of government, education, industry, and society. It's been clear to us, for instance, we do a lot of good work as the Department of Science, Technology, and Innovation, as well as our entities. For instance, for the first time, we have now developed capacity to produce, right from scratch, local vaccines a number of whom are needed in the African continent. You saw what the CSIR is doing, truly and really some good work. But this story is not being told in a manner that it should be told. That is where science journalism becomes important. Now, the fourth and final issue I wish to reflect on is our expectation of this 2025 conference. We hold the view that part of our responsibility as policymakers, scientists, and science communicators is to encourage governments to embrace science-driven decision-making. This must be one of your goals as well. Not when today in the world we are told by some leaders of very powerful countries that science is not important. There is nothing like climate change. We must use common sense to run governments and the countries. Really? In 2025, rely on common sense? Your work is cut out. That says something. Therefore, science journalism has a much bigger role to play in society. That's why we supported this, and we support this conference and also being held here so much as the department, because we believe in the value of your work. So it is our expectation, therefore, that the 2025 World Conference of Science Journalists will officially reflect on and provide clear recommendations on the role of science journalism in these 5 areas. I always like to leave some takeaways. How many you take out of the takeaways, it's up to you. Firstly, actively combating discrimination, stereotypes, or biases, and promoting human rights and the dignity of persons, especially marginalized groups, in how science is communicated. Secondly, responding to the challenge of fake news and misinformation and how this impacts public attitudes towards science. For example, there are people who are telling a story that there is genocide in South Africa against Afrikaners, you know. It's a lie that is told with such boldness. It's disturbing, actually. Why? Because we took action and took Israel to the International Court of Justice. So they are trying to say, how can you do that when you yourself are committing genocide? There's no genocide in this country. Speak the truth. Tell us why you have problems with South Africa. We have problems with no one. We're a country that is very welcoming to whoever wants to come and work with us, but on condition that there is commitment to promote human rights and social justice. Thirdly, the challenge you have is to integrate new technologies, such as artificial intelligence, into science journalism. That's an interesting task, that. And doing so without compromising the integrity of the profession. Fourthly, addressing the capacity disparities in science journalism on the African continent and between the global south and the global north. Fifthly and lastly, using science journalism as a bridge to facilitate science diplomacy and the building of global solidarity, which was one of the sub-themes of our G20 presidency, solidarity. In conclusion, putting a conference like this together is a huge and complex logistical project. And I wish to thank all our national and international partners who contributed in a variety of ways to ensure the hosting, of this historic conference, including our host venue, the CSIR. By the way, I should tell you that last week we informed Cabinet of the Republic of South Africa about the holding of this conference. So they are aware from the President, all my colleagues who are ministers, that this important conference is taking place here. Esteemed colleagues, science journalism has a vital role to play, not only in ensuring that we build an appreciation for the value of science in society, but also in ensuring that we use science to build a just and humane world, as the theme of this conference enjoined us to do. I wish you a productive conference and look forward to the outcome of your deliberations. It is now my honor and privilege, I don't know whether I'm taking powers I don't have, but I've been advised to say that it's my honor and privilege to declare the World Conference of Science Journalists 2025 officially open. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Minister, for those rousing remarks. And also, I'll mention that the Minister has been the patron of this conference and has for years been a supporter of science journalism in this country. And not a lot of science ministers can say that, so we really appreciate all your support. So now, don't worry, we're close to the end, everybody. I'd like to invite the choir back on stage. The Minister's going to be moving to the exhibition hall to be giving some interviews to journalists. So while some of those journalists move out now for interviews, the choir is going to come back on stage briefly and sing 2 wonderful songs for you guys.
What
Thank you, choir. Give one more. Thank you, choir. Such a wonderful song. I was tempted to sing along, but fortunately I'm kind to you, so I won't. Our keynote tonight today is by the wonderful advocate Cormac Cullinan. An environmental attorney and winner of the Royal Geographical Society's 2025 Shackleton Prize for the Protection of Polar Regions. And he's going to be giving a wonderful talk today on planet, people, and the law, deploying the power of the law to reshape our relationship with our world. Join me in welcoming Cormac on stage. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. And before I start, I'm speaking both as a lawyer and also as an activist, as an environmental activist. I was an activist before I was a lawyer. And in that capacity, I'm particularly grateful to all of you journalists here, because not only do you play such an important role in communicating the messages of how we need to change our behavior as humans to protect this wonderful planet, but also you offer great protection to environmental activists throughout the world who, as you know, are being killed in greater and greater numbers, because by bringing attention to environmental activists, you increase the risks to those who would suppress them. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you for that. And also, as I hope you will see, although my talk is intended to be slightly provocative, I am a person who believes in the importance of bringing science and law closer together. For example, all of you will be aware of the discrepancy. So science, for example, is telling us that we mustn't use fossil fuels and do all kinds of things which are exacerbating climate change, and yet most of those things are entirely legal. So it's very clear the very big gap between science and law. Let me just... Oh, sorry. So this is what I'm going to speak about. First of all, I'm just going to mention the context in which this discussion is taking place, which is the degradation of Earth. I'm not going to spend any time on that because all of you know, if you read the science, it's terrifying. But this is important, I think, to start with that context. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the journey that I've been through reimagining law and governance from an ecocentric perspective. And the implications of how transforming our ideas of law have had for how we relate to Earth, and give some examples. And then what I would like to end with is looking at whether this can be applied to science journalism. Sorry. So that slide for me kind of summarizes the predicament that humanity finds itself in. We are progressively destroying our habitat, and like the caterpillars on that leaf, we have no future by continuing to act in that way. What is required is cultural transformation. That is imperative, and it's the kind of transformation that is represented there, the transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly. It is an absolutely thorough transformation of our cultures. Without that, if we remain caterpillars, we have no future. And this is the scientific way of putting it. This is the IPBES comments. And what is interesting for me is these comments came from scientists who are trying to save global biodiversity. And after many years of watching a target after target be missed, they came to the conclusion that you can't achieve the biodiversity targets, the global biodiversity targets, without this kind of transformative change in society. So I think that the recognition among people who look at these problems that transformative social change is necessary is now widespread, but not being acted on. Now, part of what I've been involved in for many years now is reimagining law. Now, one of the most important things to appreciate at the outset is that law is a social construct. We made it up. Many cultures have come up with different legal systems, and of course that means we can rethink it. Now, law has many functions. In some ways, you can see it as the kind of DNA of society, because by that I mean it both structures society, it by constitutions, etc., reflect society's vision of itself. It reflects how power may be exercised in that society, and it guides people's actions. But it also determines how society replicates itself, like DNA. So if you want to change society, you really have to change the DNA and the legal system, among other things. Now, it's important to appreciate that a legal system reflects a society's idea of law, if you like, its philosophy of law or jurisprudence. And that philosophy or jurisprudence of law reflects the underlying worldview of the society, the cosmology of the society. And I'm starting by drawing attention to that reference because I think that it's important to appreciate that one can't start at the law. One has to go deeper if one's going to make the kind of fundamental transformation of society that we're speaking about. Now, for most of human history, Earth was understood as this mother who provided us with all that we needed. She nurtured us, fed us, clothed us, gave us all we needed to live. But in the 16th and 17th century of Europe, in the so-called Age of Enlightenment, a different image of Earth began to emerge. And this was the idea that the universe was essentially mechanistic, that it worked like a giant clock. And you see there were the physical models that people created. So from this perspective, humans were the only subjects with souls, and everything else was mechanism, was object, which was there to be manipulated for the benefit of the humans. Now, some of the bad guys behind this story are René Descartes and Sir Francis Bacon. Now, of course, Descartes came up with a strong definition between mind and matter, among other things. And Sir Francis Bacon, you will probably know him as one of the founders of science and the empirical method, and he certainly made a huge contribution in that respect. But he was also Attorney General for James I of England at a time when they were burning witches. And so it's very important to realize that this history, the good that came out of the Age of Enlightenment in Europe has a dark side to it, and that is reverberating both, it continues to reverberate both in law and to a lesser extent in science. But I'll return to that later. Now, as a consequence of the Age of Enlightenment, we had a number of impacts on society, particularly the idea that humans are separate from and superior to nature, which led to increased alienation and also a kind of eco-apartheid. Now, for those of you who've grown up in South Africa will know that apartheid literally means separateness. That's the meaning of the word. And it was the idea that one sector of the community was separate from and superior to the rest of the community and should exploit the rest of the community for their own ends. Now, that, it seems to me, is very much the same kind of thinking which the dominant cultures have put in place between humans on the one hand as the dominant part of society and all the rest of the community of life. The idea that we are separate, that we are exceptional, that we are superior, and that we have power over nature. And this has got so extreme that people are writing about our concept of ourselves being not just as Homo sapiens, the wise hominid, but Homo Deus. We think of ourselves as godlike. Now, this you could loosely call the mythology of dominance, the idea that we are separate from and superior to the world, and the world is a kind of object for us to manipulate for our own good. But I was very influenced by Thomas Berry, a deep thinker and American monk, and one of the things that Thomas said is there on the screen. The universe is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. Now, this is, of course, an insight which all the indigenous cultures of the world have had and continue to have. They understand that we do not live in a mechanistic world and that we live in a marvelous animate world, which makes the world so much more interesting and exciting to live in, to be members of this most incredible community of life, this intricate, astounding community of life we've been able to find anywhere in the entire universe. But of course, for people brought up in the dominant culture, this changes everything. The idea that we are on the inside of nature, not the outside of nature, is revolutionary, if you like, despite its obviousness. Now science, many of the sciences, such as ecology and of quantum physics, have long moved away from the idea that that the world is mechanism and we are separate from the world. But that is not true of law and economics and politics. So in 2002, I wrote a book, Wild Law, which was about a new philosophy of law, an ecocentric philosophy of law, if you like, about rethinking law. And I call it Earth Jurisprudence. And as you will see there, it was based on work done by Thomas Berry, which I elaborated upon. But from this perspective, humans aren't the primary lawgivers, the universe is, because the universe is ordered. We are born into a system of order, and if we want to flourish within that system of order, we need to understand the laws, which is where science comes in, and we also need to respect those laws and adapt our behavior accordingly. So from this perspective, the Earth community and all the beings that constitute it have fundamental rights, including the right to exist and to play their role within that community. Of course, no aspect can have absolute rights. The rights of all are limited to the extent necessary to maintain the community as a whole. So, for example, you may have the right, but part of the ecological function of, let's say, a zebra is to be eaten. Food chains hold together ecosystems. So this is not something which is saying that any of the rights are absolute, but when a lion eats a zebra, it is not undermining the ecosystem, it's contributing to it. So these ideas gained a lot of legitimacy in 2010 when Evo Morales, the then president of Bolivia, convened a People's World Summit on climate change and the rights of Mother Earth. This was convened after the failure of COP15, I think it was, in Copenhagen, which was a complete disaster, like many are. And so he said, why don't the peoples of the world come together and try and solve the problems which the governments can't? So this was an extraordinary event at which people from all over the world met in working groups, came to conclusions and reported back at the end to the governments of the world. And one of the documents that I was involved in drafting was the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth, which came out of that conference. And the Universal Declaration of Mother Earth, of the Rights of Mother Earth, is intended to be to complement the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is, if you like, a species-specific articulation of rights. And this was an attempt to reflect the understanding that we are part of this Earth community. And you'll see the definition of Mother Earth there. But importantly, once we had this document, it provided a basis for unity, a kind of manifesto, if you like. And the important thing in articulating the rights of other than human beings, or more than human beings, is not necessarily the rights in themselves, because a jellyfish doesn't really care whether you think it's got rights or not. The key issue is that once you recognize those rights, you are recognizing that other beings are subjects, they're not objects, and secondly, that humans have corresponding duties to respect those rights. So most of the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth is, in fact, consists of human duties. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble with this. Later in 2010, we realized that if we're going to change the world from the situation that we are now in to a situation where the rights of nature are recognized, we'd need a lot of people on our side. So a small group of people met in Ecuador at the foot of Mount Tungurahua, an active volcano, and formed the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature to take this forward. And nowadays, the Global Alliance has members throughout the world, and we just met in Belém in Brazil to celebrate our 15th birthday. And it was a really astounding meeting, full of young people, indigenous people from around the world, full of ideas and energy. And it really was a thing of beauty to see that a small group of people, something started 15 years ago, has grown in this way and is still growing. But just to sum up, what I wanted to show you here is that if you start with the worldview at the top, the mechanistic worldview, that humans are separate from nature, you end up dropping down beneath that to concluding that the sources of all law are human, and that the purpose of our legal systems is really to facilitate the domination and exploitation of Earth for the benefit of humans. And that leads to law taking the form of recognizing that the only legal subjects are human, states, and corporations, and the rest of what we might call the environment, the rest of nature, is property, which is capable of being owned, bought, and sold. But if you look on the other side, if you start somewhere differently with an integral worldview, that the Earth is community and that human well-being is derivative, in other words, our human well-being is derived from the well-being of Earth, of nature. It's not a standalone thing. And then you come to a legal system based on a philosophy which recognizes the Earth as the primary legislator, that the purpose of our legal system should be to promote the harmonious coexistence of people, not with nature, but within nature, because we're part of nature, and that there are many legal subjects, all which have the right to be. And it also changes your concept of justice. Instead of a retributive concept of justice, which we have in legal systems today, which is about punishment, it would apply restorative justice, which was, if there's an injustice, the key thing to do is how to restore the damaged relationships that led to that injustice. But it also raises the very deep question of what is our role within the community of life? What are we supposed to do? How do we contribute to this community of life if we're not separate, if we abandon the idea that we are separate from it? And I think this is particularly important because once one shifts the concept of the human away from the idea that we are the dominant colonizers of this planet and that we're separate from it, to an ecological sense of self, which understands ourselves as deeply embedded and entangled in this community of life, then in a sense everything changes. So when I'm talking about harmonious coexistence within nature, that's more or less what I'm talking about. The idea that the purpose of law should be to guide us to be good earthlings, not to facilitate and legitimize the exploitation of Earth by focusing on who gets the mining rights or the logging rights, etc. And this has actually been reflected in the Constitution of Ecuador, adopted in 2008, because they talk about living well, or the good way of living, el buen vivir or suma causa in Quechua. But you can see that from that wording from the Constitution, how humans are situated within the context and the importance of harmonious coexistence. Now, for many years, we battled against, people thought we were crazy for advancing the idea of rights of nature. If you speak to a lawyer, it sounds self-evidently absurd because only subjects can have rights and nature is not a subject in the eyes of the law. But we believe that it is now an idea who's come, and this is an extract from an advisory opinion of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights on the state responsibilities for climate change. And that opinion, as you will see, specifically endorses the idea of using rights of nature as an effective means by which we can address climate change. And certainly the movement is growing very fast all over the world. Now, I'm now going to give you a couple of examples so that you can see how this might play out. One is about the rights of Antarctica. And yesterday, it was Antarctica Day, the anniversary of the signing of the Antarctic Treaty. But it was also a very, very big day for this movement, because yesterday we officially had a global launch of the Antarctic Alliance, which is going to take the Antarctic Rights Campaign forward. And if you go to the website, antarcticrights.org, you will see contributions, poems, images, videos from people all over the world, and a picture of the globe with light beams coming up from it, showing where each of those contributions came from. Because what we're trying to show is the emergence of a global movement in almost real time. So when I started working on Antarctica, I was appalled by how little I knew about it. I thought I knew something about it, but I realized I completely underestimated it. Antarctica and the Southern Ocean are 10% of the surface of the planet. It's enormous. The continent is bigger than the USA and Mexico put together. It's holding most of the globe's fresh water. It's absorbing vast amounts of CO2. It drives ocean circulation around the world. And interestingly, it's not owned by any state. So it really is extraordinary. So why focus, as somebody living in Cape Town, South Africa, on Antarctica? Well, the first thing, of course, is it's incredibly important for climate stability. If we want to get climate stability back, we have to look after Antarctica. If that ice melts, it'll take a long time to melt. We're talking about sea level rise of the order of 60 meters. No more New York, Paris, London, Cape Town. The globe would be massively changed, and the only way you get it back is another ice age. It's got a unique ecology, unique ecosystems, irreplaceable, it's wilderness. But importantly, it also provides a place for innovation. We think that because it's not owned by anybody, it is an area in which we can persuade the nations of the world and the peoples of the world to experiment with ecocentric governance. Now, the other big motivation for this is that the Antarctic Treaty System is not working. I won't go through all the details of this, but in essence, the main threat to Antarctica is climate change, and it's originating outside the treaty area, over which the treaty has no jurisdiction, so it cannot address that. It's also just a small number of states who have decision-making powers, but the system runs on consensus. Now, when you have a consensus-based system and some of the actors are acting in bad faith, it's very, very easy to block a process. And indeed, there's been almost no progress on, for example, marine protected areas for the last 15 years or so. And also, of course, it includes, for example, both Russia and the Ukraine, so you can imagine how difficult it is to achieve consensus. So basically, the system that has been put in place to protect Antarctica is no longer adequate, even though it's done very, very good work in the past. So our approach to dealing with this involves reimagining how humans relate to Antarctica, and particularly reconceiving Antarctica, bringing in the wisdom from indigenous perspectives throughout the world, who never adopted the mechanistic worldview, to adopt a rights-based approach, an approach which puts Antarctica first above human interests, and envisages change driven primarily by civil society, but hopefully by some states as well. So first of all, it's about reconceptualizing Antarctica. So Antarctica is not a place, it's a living community, it's a being composed of many beings. And as soon as you do that, you enter the language of relationship and relatedness. It's not about managing Antarctica, It's about managing our relationships with Antarctica and asking ourselves about the quality of our relationships with Antarctica and our connections with Antarctica. So we've expressed this is how we propose doing it. We've drafted a declaration which is on the website and which will be finalized during the course of the next year and signed in Cape Town in December 2026, in a year's time. And that, in a sense, is like the Declaration of Independence, or perhaps interdependence, of Antarctica. The second thing is to create a vehicle strong enough to carry that forward. That's the Antarctic Alliance, which was launched yesterday. We need to have ways of representing Antarctica, taking the voice of Antarctica into human decision-making. Now, none of us, we aren't Antarctica. We can't actually be Antarctica. But what we can do is learn to listen better to Antarctica and to translate those voices into messages which can be taken into human decision-making processes that affect Antarctica. We need to build the movement by connecting with people all over the world to campaign and and of course, one of the really important things is because Antarctica has no indigenous people, a voice for Antarctica is truly a voice for the planet. I think it's also a voice for humanity, because I believe that what's good for Antarctica is also good for humanity. But the important thing is that it allows for an entirely new kind of politics. We are proposing creating Antarctica as an entity at international law level, the equivalent of a state, so that Antarctica can have a seat in the COPs, it can be represented in court, and that we can speak for Antarctica. In other words, at the current situation, you've got many countries each advancing their own national interests when they're talking about Antarctica, but there's no pure voice for Antarctica. So this is incredibly... it's totally unprecedented. It would change international law. There isn't currently any body at international law that isn't human-created. So it's very significant. And the journey that we've taken so far, I think, is progressing well. The idea only started 2021, a small group of people talking about the idea. In October this year, the World Conservation Congress, the IUCN World Conservation Congress in Abu Dhabi, passed a resolution about recognizing the rights of Antarctica. It also passed 4 other resolutions on the rights of nature, which gives you some sense of the growth of the rights of nature movement globally. Yesterday, we launched the Antarctic Alliance and the campaign. We'll now work to strengthen that and to finalize the Antarctic Declaration over the next year. So I really encourage all of you to join, either as individuals. If you go to our website, you can join, or even more importantly, if you can persuade the organizations that you're part of to join, and so that you can be actively involved in shaping the declaration, and which we intend to adopt during an Antarctica week next year in Cape Town. And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how one actually establishes legitimate ways of being interlocutors for Antarctica, for taking Antarctica's voice forward. People always ask us that question, who's going to speak for Antarctica? But we don't want to rush into an answer. This is a very deep, complex question, and we need a very inclusive discussion about it. But we're envisaging that it'll probably be some body of people, perhaps a kind of equivalent of a parliament, which includes people who've got all kinds of knowledge about Antarctica, but not just knowledge about Antarctica, who have an intimate connection with Antarctica, a connection of not just mind, but also heart, people who really care for Antarctica and will stand for an Antarctica. But what's important is that not that we don't know the answers to those questions now, but that we are asking those questions, which I believe are very important. So this, I believe, has great strategic significance. It provides a global platform to unite people. We can mobilize people everywhere to be allies of Antarctica. It changes the perspective of the dominant cultures. Suddenly, we're talking about subjects and our connections with them and quality of relationships. And we, as I mentioned earlier, the importance is changing our human behavior, not trying to manage Antarctica, which is far too wild and fierce to be managed by people. I've already mentioned that the rights of nature is very fast growing. It's been identified as the fastest growing movement in the legal movement in the 21st century. And I think it's really important and will succeed in the long run because it's better aligned with science or reality than the current legal systems, which are based on the scientifically discredited idea that the world is mechanism and we are separate and superior from it, as opposed to being another leaf on the tree of life. So we also, just to mention quickly, have initiated early stages of another campaign to have Table Mountain recognized as a being. So Indigenous people always recognize it as a being, Huri Kwaho in one language, or Mlindi, or Zimo in another, but we are trying to get people in Cape Town to recognize the reality that the mountain is a presence in their lives, and it provided water in the drought when we were approaching day zero. It's a major part in people's mental health, etc. And we're asking the question, what if Table Mountain had a voice in Cape Town's affairs? But now turning to science journalism quickly before I end. So I'm aware that I'm a lawyer and not a science journalist, and that I'm going perhaps where angels fear to tread. I'm also aware that many people in this room are already far down the road that I'm going to propose. So I say this with humility. But I was interested in the theme of this conference, and looking at it, I think there are a number of interesting questions. When we say science, are we talking about ecology, everything is connected and it's all about relationships? Or are we talking about scientism, the belief that science is the only way to know the truth? I think as journalists, one needs to acknowledge that we are deeply entangled. We are earthlings. None of us stand separate from the system. That there are diverse ways of knowing the world, and that often objectivity is pushed. But I think one has to be very careful. When we're talking about objectivity, are we talking about the discredited idea that we can stand outside the system and look at it from a superior vantage point? Or are we just talking about it in the sense of being accurate and having reasoned opinions, which is, of course, a very good thing? And then we need to ask, what kind of justice and for whom? Are we just talking about justice for people, or are we talking about justice for the whole Earth community? Are we talking about punitive, retributive justice or restorative justice? And so if we apply this ecocentric lens to science journalism, I think it raises a number of very important questions, which I hope will pervade some of your discussions later in this conference. For example, who speaks and to whom do we listen? Now, we already know among people that money talks, that governments and corporations talk very loudly, those with access to social media. But we're asking a much, and I know you ask those questions of yourselves already, but we're asking a much deeper question. Can we hear more than human voices? And the New York University has a more than human rights project they refer to as moth. So you're using, can we hear the moths? And importantly, how do we listen to those other voices? What stories do we tell? And from whose perspective? Are we always telling it from the perspective of the colonizer? Or might we imaginatively tell it from the perspective of others? And how do we tell those stories? Do we tell them not only intellectually, but also with heart? And are we aware of our own blind spots and the need to unlearn some of the things we've been taught by our cultures? Because I think we suffer in the dominant cultures from many blinkering beliefs. In other words, beliefs which restrict our vision and prevent us seeing the reality, the truth. So on the one side there, you see I've listed a number of beliefs, and then on the other side of the slide, many of the blind spots which I think those beliefs give rise to. And I think it's really hard to not suffer from these blind spots. We've been taught that the idea, the dominant cultures teach that the idea that other than humans could have mind and agency is ridiculous. Many scientists reject the idea that there could be a spiritual dimension to life. So to end off, the provocation that I'd like to throw out, and I know that many of you are already far down this road, so my apologies if I'm telling you things that you already know, but is that if we look at humans, including journalists, as integral members of the community of life, then what we learn from indigenous cultures throughout the world is that to be a good earthling, to be a good member of this community of life, you need to have humility, respect. You need to observe the principles of reciprocity. For every taking, there must be a giving, and you must take responsibility. Those are values which you find throughout indigenous cultures throughout the world. And I think they are also very useful principles to apply professionally as journalists. And responsibility, for example, the minister earlier mentioned being accountable to society. But I would suggest we need to be more than that. We need to be accountable to the earth community of which we are part, and we have a duty to contribute to the health, well-being, and functioning of that earth community. We're also talking, as journalists, you're very familiar with the right of freedom of expression, which you exercise every day. But if you see it through an ecocentric lens, then everything in the planet is expressing itself. And in many ways, humans are curtailing that freedom of expression. And the fact that the rest of the planet may not speak in written English does not mean it's not communicating, but it's on us to understand and to change ourselves so that we may hear that better. And what I think is particularly important is for science journalists to translate and carry the diverse voices of the community of Earth to people, so that people can hear them. And this involves speaking truth to human powers, to taking the voices of those who are the moths that are not part of our political systems at the moment, and bring their voices to those humans who are making decisions that affect them. And to end off, there's a lovely book called Blessed Unrest by Paul Hawken, in which he looked at the emergence of ecological and environmental movements throughout the world, millions and millions of people forming organizations. And he suggested that, in fact, these were like the immune system of the planet. We are all part of the planet, and there are people who are feeling the injuries to the planet and to this community of life and are responding by fighting against them, very much like an immune system of a body does, because we are not protecting nature. We are nature protecting herself. So if one thinks of it in terms of that lovely metaphor, then I think in many ways the science journalists are like the nervous system. You're the ones who need to pick up the messages, the cry of the earth, and translate it into ways. You need to carry it to the brain, to the decision-making parts of the human culture, which have the power to change the human behavior that is causing that pain. So I think that science journalisms in the context of the time in which we live play an incredibly important part, and I hope that you will all continue to be the nervous system of society that connects us to the earth. Thank you.
Advocate Cormac Cullinan, thank you very much for those inspiring words. We're almost done. Before I close the session, we're just going to do a couple of quick housekeeping things. First of all, on the schedule, you'll see quite a few rooms have changed. So to avoid confusion between the changes between Ruby, Amber 1, Amber 2, just please check the updated schedules and the updated PDFs before you go and check your rooms. Then I'll also let you know that our friends over at the Open Notebook will be giving away 10 free copies of their ebook, The Craft of Science Writing, later this week. So to enter that raffle, and that's amazing of them, thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. To enter that competition, you can go past our South African science journalist stand in the exhibition hall and drop either your business card, or we've got a little piece of paper. You can write your details down on that, and we'll be giving that, making that decision later on in the week, probably on the last day, and giving away 10 free copies then, so don't miss out. And then there'll be bidding happening for the 2029 World Conference for Science Journalists, and that will be presentations happening to the World Federation of Science Journalists Board, and that will be happening from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock in Amber Room. So all are welcome to come and have a look at what some of those bids are saying. Also happening in Amber 2 is going to be the General Assembly for the African Federation of Science Journalists. So all the African journalists who want to join organizations, who want to form their own, are welcome to attend that as well. They'll be happening after 2 o'clock. And then everyone who wants to attend field trips on Friday, there still are slots open for field trips. So you can't fill your names in online anymore, but there are notice boards in the foyer. So please make sure you go past there and fill in your name for anyone who's around on Friday and still wants to go on a field trip. And then tomorrow evening, we still have spaces opening for Market at the Shed. So if you still want to go on that wonderful reception after the conference is over, please make sure you go past the foyer and you can pay there as well. And then lastly, anyone who's staying for the Human Exposome project presented by Professor Hatung, it's going to be presented in this room, so please don't move. It'll be happening right after the session is closed. And thank you for all of your wonderful attention. I hope you enjoyed all of the speeches, and please enjoy your week. We've prepared a really awesome thing for you this week. So thank you very much. Session closed. Please go enjoy.
So this is Professor Hartung who's going to be speaking.